Okay, so today we're going over domain and range part 1. So we started breaking it up into different groups. So tomorrow we'll do some different ones, and then the third day. So this is basically part 1 of 3 different parts. So let's look at domain and range. So remember, domain are the x values and range are the y values. So the domain are the x values, or what's going into the machine, or it's the independent variable. Range are the y values, or the numbers that are coming out of the machine, or the outputs. And the range is also the dependent variable. And then we're going to determine if it is or is not a function. Okay, so let's look at the first one. So in this problem, we just have a bunch of individual points. We can call these points, each point has coordinates, an x coordinate and a y coordinate. So remember, the x coordinate always goes first and the y coordinate always goes second. The x coordinate is the horizontal axis and the y coordinate is the vertical axis. So this is your input and this is your output. And when they ask for us to find the domain, we just want to look at each of the x values. So let's identify the coordinates of each point. So the x value in this point would be -4. And then how high or low is the point? The point went as low as -2. What about this point up here? This point went as far to the left as -3. And then how high or low did that point? That point went up to 4. So those are called the coordinates of that point. Then we have this other point. This one went as far to the right as 1, and it stayed at 0. So 1, 0. So you guys should already know how to identify your coordinates. This one went as far to the right as 1, and it went as high up as 5. So remember, the y value will move the point up or down. It moves it higher or lower. The x coordinate moves it to the left or to the right, and the y coordinate moves it up or down. So this point right here, we say the coordinates, so the x coordinate, it moved it to the 3 to the right, and then it moved it down -2. So that would be the coordinates. So let me erase it so you can see just the coordinates. So I went ahead and erased everything, and I labeled and highlighted in orange all the x values. So when we list the domain, we're just going to list each of the x values, or the x coordinates. Do the little squiggly set notation. And you should always put the smallest number first and then all the way up to the largest number. So you want to look at the point that's furthest to the left. So -4 is going to be the smallest, and then -3. So notice I started to the left, and I'm working my way to the right, because that'll put them in smallest to largest order. 1, and then we've got another 1. So because we have the number 1 duplicated, we're not going to duplicate it, because the domain is not asking how often the x values are put into the machine, because remember, domain are the inputs. So we don't really want to know how often we're putting something into the machine. We just want to know what kinds of numbers are being put into the machine, because remember, the x's are also the inputs. So we're only going to list the 1 once. And then we also have this 3 as an input. So those are the domain. Now let's list the range. The range are the y values. And wouldn't it be smarter, if we're going to list them from lowest to highest, wouldn't we start with the ones that are at the lowest point? So wouldn't those be the lowest? And again, -2 is coming out of the machine. Remember, range is what's coming out. Those are the outputs. So -2 is coming out of the machine, and we're going to put little squiggly, which is our set notation. You can practice doing that. So we're not going to list it twice, because we don't need to know that it came out multiple times. We just want to know what kinds of numbers are coming out of the function or the machine. Then the next lowest one would be 0, 0, right? And then wouldn't 4 be the next lowest? So we're working our way from the lowest point all the way up to the highest point. And if you can do this without labeling the coordinates, that's great. And then 5 is the highest. If I can get my colors to work. Right? So you're just listing each of the y values. You're like, what? Is that all it is? Yeah, that's all it is. Just put them in order from the smallest number to the largest number. And then let me erase that. So I just wanted to show you if you can do it without like listing the coordinates. When you're looking at the domain, just go the farthest to the left. So this coordinate is -4, and then this one is -3, and then this one is at 1, and then we got another one, but we're not going to list it, and then this one is at 3. So you don't have to waste all that time like actually putting and writing out the coordinates like we just did. Okay, is it a function? Do you remember the vertical line test? So remember the vertical line test is if you can drop a vertical line and hit the graph in more than one spot. So notice this vertical line only hits once, but this vertical line hits twice. So because this hit more than one time, do you remember, is it a function or not a function? If it hits more than once, it is not a function because it failed the vertical line test, right? VLT for vertical line test. It hit the graph more than once, so it's not a function. Okay, so problem example number 2. So again, when we're doing the domain, we're just looking at the x values. And the x values tell you how far left and how far right a coordinate is. So this point, how far to the left did it go? -4. How far to the left did this point go? -3. How far to the left did this go? It went to -1. This one is at 0, right? If you follow it down, it's at 0. And this one went to the right 2, so this point went to the right 2. So we're just, remember the x value moves a point to the left and to the right. And the y value will move a point up or down. Let's look at the range. The range are the y values. So the y values are how high and how low a point is. And we want you to write it from smallest to the largest. So when we want to look at the lowest point, so when we're looking at the lowest point, isn't this point the lowest point, right? Didn't, as low as it went was -1. And then isn't this point the next lowest, which was 0, right? Because that's 0. And then isn't this point at 2? And then how high did this point go? It went up to 3. And this point went up to 5. So that is your domain and range. And then is it a function? If we drop a vertical line, it only hits once, right? No matter what, it's only going to hit once. So yes, it's a function because it passes the vertical line test. It only hit once, so it is a function because it passes the vertical line test. Okay, so here we're trying to find the domain and range. Remember the domain are the x values. So the x values takes the point and moves points to the furthest to the left and furthest to the right. So let's look at how far to the left this picture goes. So you can see this sideways trapezoid. This is the furthest it goes to the left, and this is the furthest it goes to the right. So basically, isn't the trapezoid just in here? So the trapezoid is just that much. And remember, if you were in class yesterday or you watched the pre-video, we talked about how do you write that domain statement. So basically, isn't the trapezoid, so we have to write a between statement. So we have to use the letter x, and aren't the numbers between -4 and -2? Isn't the trapezoid positioned between -4 and -2? And remember, when we're talking about between, it's always going to be less than, and we're including the trapezoid, so it should be equal to. Now let's look at the range. The range moves the points up and down. So we want to know what's the highest the graph goes. So if you look at this, isn't this the highest it goes? And if you go over, so the 4 is the highest it goes. And the lowest, if you look at the bottom of the trapezoid, this is the lowest it goes. So then we're going to say that the trapezoid, the highest the trapezoid goes is 4, and then it goes all the way down to just 3. So therefore, we have to write a between statement that describes, right, that's the range. All the numbers that go is between 3. Goes as low as -3, and it went as high as 4. So we have to write a between statement. So remember, we are talking about the range. So we're going to write y, and it's between -3 and 4. So that, right, the lowest it went was -3 and the highest it went was 4. We always put the lowest number on the left and the highest number on the right, and it's always less than or equal to. And then let's check to see if it's a function. So I took a moment and cleaned it up a little bit, and let's do the vertical line test. So if you dropped a vertical line, would it hit the graph? And the trapezoid is the graph. So the trapezoid is the graph. Would it hit the graph more than one time? And there are lots of vertical lines, right? Didn't that vertical line, and you just have to show one. So that vertical line hit more than once, so therefore it is not a function because it failed the vertical line test. When we dropped a vertical line, it hit more than one time. It hit more than once, so therefore it's not a function. So let's look at the next example. So remember, when you're doing your homework, if you can print out your homework, it would be best, because then you can do what I'm doing and grab 2 different colors, right? If not, you have to do it visually, and that's a little bit harder. You can maybe just sketch it a little bit. So remember, we're looking for the domain. So the domain are the x values. So the x values is how far to the left does a graph go? And isn't this as furthest to the left it goes? So isn't -4 the furthest to the left? And then isn't +2 the furthest to the right? So I'm going to shade, and just to emphasize, I'm going to shade all the numbers that are between, right? Isn't that where the graph's at? The graph is in between, and I'm going to emphasize that those are solid dots, right? So these are solid, and these are solid. So basically, we just have to write a compound between statement for this domain. So basically, the picture's in between -4 and 2. So we write all the x values, and we write between -4 and 2, and it's going to be less than or equal to. So between statements are always less than or equal to. So some of you are going to write it this way, and that's not how you write it. So you write it between less than or equal to. That's why we spent all that time with inequalities, right? So we're supposed to already know how to write a between statement. So let's look at the y values. The y values are how high or how low the graph goes. So I'm going to try to always do those in the same color. So the range is the highest it goes. So as you can see, the highest it goes is 6. So that's the highest. And you would think this is the lowest, but that's not. It dips all the way down here. So the graph, the highest and the lowest the graph goes is between 6 and 2. Right? Did you see that that's 1? This is 1, and this is 2, and this is 3, and this is 4, and this is 5. So they don't always label everything. And so we have to write a between statement for the range, for the y values. We have to say y. And remember, it's between 2 and 6. So is that the way we should write it? Nope. That doesn't make sense. That's not how a number line works. So remember, we always write the smallest number first. When we're talking about between, we write it like a number line. The smallest number is 2 and 6, right? It's between 2 and 6. It's always less or equal to. Is it a function? If we drop a vertical line, will you ever hit the graph more than once? So this line only hit it once, this line only hit it once, this line only hit it once, and you can see that no matter which vertical line I drop, it's only going to hit it once, so therefore, yes, it's a function because it passed the vertical line test. So why don't you stop the video and try this one on your own? Try to find the domain, the furthest to the left and furthest to the right, and then the range, the highest it goes and the lowest it goes. So let's see, how'd you do? So did you say that the furthest to the left the graph goes is here, which is -2, and the furthest to the right it went was 3? So basically this picture, that we call this a graph. So this is this weird shaped thing. It's called the graph, and it goes in between -2 and 3. So we basically have to write a between statement, and that's the domain. And remember, the x is the value used for domain, that's the variable, And we want between -3 and +3. Nope, not -3. That is not -3. So you have to watch out for that because it wasn't labeled, was it? This is -2 and -1, right? -3 is way over here, so it's -2 and +3. And it's always going to be less than or equal to, unless these happen to be open circles, but they weren't open circles, they were solid. So that's the reason why we have an equal to symbol underneath there. And then, so how'd you do? And then the range is how high and how low did the graph go? So can you see that the highest it goes is right here is up at 2, and the lowest it goes down here at -1. So it's between 2 and -1. So we just have to write, and these are solid, so we have to write a range statement that is between, so it went as low as -1 and it went as high as 2. So we have to write all the y values, and it went as low as -1 and it went as high as 2. Did you do good? And then did you try dropping a vertical line or visualizing dropping a vertical line? Does it ever hit more than once? So it passes. So yes, it is a function because it passes the vertical line test. So this is what we have so far, figuring out domain and range. So now let's look at some more simplistic pictures that aren't as complicated. So I bet you can stop the video and practice doing the problems that you see and then see how you do. So again, the domain are the x values, and the x values are how far to the left does the picture go or graph, and how far to the right does the graph go. So you can see if you follow it down with your eyes, you can see it goes to 4 and it goes to 1. So the graph is in between 1 and 2. Isn't that what we can say? Isn't that what we see? That the graph is between 1 and 4. So it's between 1 and 4. And remember, that's your domain. So all the numbers that are between 1 and 4, are you writing your symbols right? Did you write the less than symbols? Now, notice I should not have put an equal to symbol because these are open circles. So I need to erase the equal to symbols. Now my answer, it matches the picture, right? So this should have been open circles. Now let's do the range. So the range is how low and how high does it go? So isn't the lowest the graph goes is 2, and if you look with your eyes straight across, isn't the highest it goes 5? So isn't the range in between 2 and 5? And then again, they have an open circle and an open circle. So we have to describe the range. So remember, did you use the y values, and did you put the lowest to the left? So the lowest it went was 2 and the highest it went was 5. And this time it should just be less than symbols without the equal to because there was an open circle. And then if we drop a vertical line, will you ever hit more than once? Nope. So yes, it's a function because it passed the vertical line test. When we dropped a vertical line, it will only hit once. I will never be able to drop a vertical line where it hit more than once. So it always is going to hit just once. So it is a function. Okay, so why don't you stop the video and try this one yourself first. Okay, let's see how you did. So domain are the x values. The x values are how far to the left and how far to the right does the graph go. So doesn't the graph go as far left as -4 and as far right as 1? Right? You can see it with your eyes. And so we're going to emphasize, so you might find it helpful if you were able to print this out, that you could mark it up and notice that this one's a solid circle and then this one's an open circle, right? So we have to write the domain that is between -4 and +1. So we have to write x. All the x values are between -4 and +1, and this one has a closed circle, and this point at 1, it has an open circle. So you should have those less than or equal to and then a less than symbol. How'd you do? Range is how high or how low the graph goes. And you can see that the lowest it went was -1. You can see it with your eyes. And the highest it went was 4. So we say that it has a range that is between 1 and 4. Now you know I did that pre-lesson. So here is an open circle, and then down here, if you see it, is a closed circle, right? Do you see that this one's a closed circle right here? And then do you see that this one's an open? So we just have to write a range statement that matches that between sentence. Did you remember to write the letter Y? And the lowest it went was -1, and the highest it went was 4. And the -1 is the one that has the closed circle, and the +4 is the one that has the open circle. And then if you were to drop a vertical line, would it ever hit more than one time? Nope. So it is a function because it passes the vertical line test. Let's see if you can do the next one. Okay, on this one, looking for the domain, we're looking how far to the left and how far to the right does it go. Do you see that the first it went to the left was -5 and the furthest it went to the right was 3. So it goes between -5 and 3. So we're just going to emphasize that to show you that it goes between -5 and 3. And notice that this one has a solid circle and this one has an open circle. So I have to make a domain statement for all the numbers that are between -5 and 3. So all the numbers that are between -5 and 3, and at -5 it's an open, and at 3 it's solid, so you should have your equal to symbol. Make sure you're writing your numbers nice and clear. On tonight's homework, it's a fill-in, so you can just type in your answers. So if you click in the cell, it'll allow you to type it in. So that's pretty cool. The range, how high and how low does it go? Doesn't it just stay right here at -4, right? So doesn't each one of these ordered pairs have a y coordinate of -4? So no matter which y point you pick, isn't that always going to be -4 for each one of these y values? So it didn't go high and low, it just sat, right? It just stayed at -4. So we're just going to use the set notation and just say just -4, that's it. It just sat right there at -4. It didn't move any higher, didn't move any lower, it just stayed at -4. And if you drop a vertical line, won't it hit just one time each time? So it is a function because it passes the vertical line test. So on this one, we're looking at the domain. So again, pause the video, see if you can figure it out first. So domain is how far left and right. And do you see it doesn't go to the left and to the right? It just sits at -3. So it just sits at -3. So this time we're just going to say the domain is just -3. It just sits right there at -3. It doesn't go any further to the left or to the right. Remember, the range is how high or low the graph goes, right? The y-axis is the range. So it went as low as -2 and it went as high as 4. So we can say that it was between -2 and 4. And notice that we have a solid circle and another solid circle. So when we write the range, don't we have to write a compound and sentence, right? A compound and sentence, which is between. We're going to use the letter Y. And remember, we have to put the lowest it went and then the highest it went. And it's a less than or equal to and a less than or equal to. So be careful. Did you write -2 is greater than or equal to Y is less than or equal to? Nope. Wrong symbols. Did you write both greater thans? Nope. Wrong symbols. So when you're writing between statements, they're always going to be less than symbols. You should always put the lowest it goes and the highest it goes. And then if you drop a vertical line, doesn't it hit lots of times? So it's a big time no, not a function. It fails big time. Fails vertical line test. So let's see what we got. So this is your homework for tonight. So you have fillables. Look at the notes. There's some notes up in the module, and you can go back and re-watch the video and pause it and try some problems first yourself. That's one way that you can do it. So make sure you're typing in your inequality sentences correctly. This is part 1. See you tomorrow for part 2.